So, distinguished President, honorable ministers, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Hanasaari this afternoon in this high-level segment discussion on ways forward in global governance. 10 years has passed since the Finnish and Tanzanian governments jointly launched the Helsinki Process on globalization and democracy. The Helsinki Process sought to contribute to global problem solving by providing a new kind of forum for different stakeholders from North and South to come together as equals to discuss and develop feasible proposals for addressing common concerns. In 2008, the report of the process was handed over to the UN Secretary General and the process ended at that second phase. This report focused on the importance of enhancing multi-stakeholder cooperation in global governance and included a number of proposals to promote that within UN system and elsewhere. The process also led to 6 specific follow-up commitments that took the process forward in specific areas, from mediating peace in Africa to enhanced civil society participation in UN climate change process. The Citizens Global Platform Network in Brazil, Finland, India and Tanzania have been involved in the process with specific emphasis on making the marginalized voices heard in the global processes. And partly for this reason, me and my colleague Nkuhi from the CGP of Finland and Tanzania are co-chairing this high-level segment today. The conference, Helsinki Process conference, started this morning and it will end tomorrow afternoon. So far, it has focused on the legacy of the Helsinki Process and taking stock on the current situation. This high-level segment will give food for thought on the continuation of these talks. After this segment, Minister Hautala will lead the discussion on sustainable development, and tomorrow is Minister Tuomioja's turn to talk about global economic governance. You are most warmly welcomed to this closing session tomorrow of the Helsinki Process, where the results of these discussions of today in the afternoon and tomorrow will be summarized. But today we will focus on the work of the high-level panel of global sustainability, which was established by the UN Secretary General in August 2010. President of the Republic, Tarja Halonen, and President Jacob Zuma on the South Africa were appointed as co-chairs of the panel. The 21 high-level members of the panel were to address sustainable development by exploring approaches for building low-carbon, green and resilient economy that can eradicate poverty and ensure a dignified life for all. The panel submitted its report, Resilient People, Resilient Planet, A Future Worth Choosing, to Secretary General Ban Ki-moon at the African Union Summit in Ethiopia just 2 weeks ago. This afternoon, we will have an excellent opportunity to hear more about the work of the panel and its recommendations from President Tarja Halonen. The panel's work is expected to feed into the Rio Plus conference next June, which I'm sure all of us are following closely. Therefore, I'm looking forward to a lively and constructive discussion and that will support us in strengthening our common vision and political will to take the brave steps that were needed towards a more sustainable and resilient global community. With these words, I would like to welcome President Tarja Halonen to give her introduction on the work of the Global Sustainability Panel. The floor is yours.
So good afternoon. I left my handbag there. You know that ladies without the handbag, they are like mothers who have lost their children. But distinguished ministers, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good friends. So if I should describe the development of the recent years, I perhaps should say so that we have been experiencing increasing uncertainty. We can see it in our economies, which look more and more fragile. We see it in the growing inequality between and within nations, also here in Finland. And we can see it in the deterioration of our global environment and consequences. So the fundamental idea of the Helsinki Process, what I understood, was to knit the new and larger coalitions for action in global problem solving, thinking that we can find more resources what we have used so far. And bringing various stakeholders, governments, business community and the civil society organizations to work together in partnerships has been recognized growingly expedient. So this recognition has been sped up the severity and complexity of the recent global challenges. And as it was mentioned already by Helena Laukko, among those most threatening are the climate change, but I wouldn't either forget, we speak here in Europe a lot of financial crisis and debt crisis, but if we think all the world, so it's also the food crisis, job crisis, and why not also the crisis of the reasonable governance. In its final report, the Helsinki Process highlighted 3 areas where the multi-stakeholders cooperation can bring added value: the confidence building, innovation, and implementation. So when I compare it how we worked in this UN high-level panel on global sustainability, so really it started about 18 months ago, and we got this generous, not quite 2 years time to make a new world. But the Secretary General who mandated the high-level panel has felt that the new paradigm was needed to boost the implementation of sustainable development. And I underline the word implementation. Our panel, a group of the independent experts, tried its best to deliver on its mandate. We formulated a vision based on, I call it the modern trinity. It's an economic growth which is welcomed, but with the social justice, and then it has to fit to the so-called planetary boundaries, which means contain the environmental sustainability. We argue that they are one and the same sustainable development agenda, and progress must be balanced across this agenda. So in the way, the idea or the message is not new. Already Gro Harlem Brundtland and all the others have underlined the importance of the sustainable development. But depending on the forum where you are, people might either underline the economic growth, forget the social justice and perhaps also the environmental side, or if they were gathering like it would be in Rio 20 years ago in Rio, so it was in the focus just the environmental side. Or if you are, those of you who have been in Porto Alegre, you know very well that there has been remembered much more the social justice than perhaps the money itself or the environmental issues. Everybody, yes, you have had people who can keep 3 things at the same time in mind, but normally that's pretty difficult. So, but also what we wanted to add is that all the wisdom is not in the cabinets. People are the center of this agenda, both as the targets of actions, but also as actors. Sustainable development is about people's opportunities to influence their future, claim their rights, and voice their concerns, and I would say also to tell their hopes. So it is about the economy which serves people's needs while respecting long-term sustainability instead of the prevailing short-termism. As regards mechanisms for achieving this sustainability vision, action is needed to enable and encourage people, markets and governments to make sustainable choices. Naturally, governments are on a driver's seat, if I put it that way. They have the power to use incentives and regulations for market actors and consumers. But those of you, especially if you are not Europeans, you can notice as an observer so that it's not easy with the drivers, but also with passengers. Sometimes we keep our hats. But it is not so easy when you have the crisis tomorrow to remember what's the sustainability development after 10 or 15 years. Ladies and gentlemen, so what then should be done to make sustainable development practical reality? So obviously, both the governments and non-governmental actors must seek for answers from various directions. First, people must be enabled to make sustainable choices. And when I say people, I mean both men and women. What we noticed in the panel, and that was not my idea, I give the thanks for the men, especially for the Kevin Rudd, Australian foreign minister, previous prime minister, that he counted once and once again that we speak about the importance of the China. But if we count what is the importance of the women, it is the same size. So it's not just, it means also a lot in economics. And when you go home, so you can count how much it will mean in your national economy. So there are also other groups which are hungry for this possibility to have more to say. Young one, poor one, and if I take the poor people, it doesn't mean that they are stupid. It needs a lot of creativity to be poor and survive. And we could all use that together in many levels. Second, the concept sustainable development must be incorporated into the mainstream economic policy debate and practices. Not so that first we have the mainstream and then somebody says that, sir, this is the sustainable development too. But so that from the beginning you think in that way. It's a new view. Third, so governance practices and institutions must be improved. So let me briefly still once again elaborate a little bit each of these three. I'm reflecting on the main conclusions of the high-level panel. So empowering people must be based also on the trinity of dimensions of sustainable development and on the implementation of the global commitments. And if I think something what has been really a success story with all its weaknesses has been the Millennium Development Goals. I happened to be again this lady from the north when it was this Millennium Summit, year 2000. Then I was together with the president of Namibia. And so I still remember the atmosphere and the spirit of the people there, how they said that, yes, what we see about the millennium we had just passed, we would like to give something more to you in the future. And then after that it was a declaration, and then it was a quite, how could I say, complicated process of the different governments to make this agenda. And agenda is not quite what was a declaration, but it has been a very good system to measure the development. It might be so that not all the goals of the Millennium Development Goals will be fulfilled in 2015, but without those goals, I'm sure the development couldn't be so fast what we have done. And of course, some of those ideas have been only halfway step, then that I think we are all ready to continue. For instance, I think that the eradication of the extreme poverty, it's fantastic if we can make it half what it was in 2000. But nobody is happy if we stop then. It's not a decent amount of the extreme poverty. The next step has to be, again, try to do something for that. We had a lot of importance already in education. And now we have seen that that's still important. Not only primary, but also secondary and vocational is crucial for ensuring that everybody can contribute to addressing today's challenges and seize opportunities. And then my personal adding is that the younger generation is always ready to say that it's fine, that they have the better education what your fathers and grandfathers or mothers and grandmothers had. But then they normally stop smiling when I say that your excellent education will be old-fashioned in much shorter time. So better to be prepared for the lifelong learning, or different kind of lifelong learning. But if we can put in the next goals also education in full scale, it's very important. And then, of course, why to study if you don't get a job? And so creating employment opportunities, decent and green jobs, especially for women and youth, help to drive sustainable growth. The next one. Of course, the current global economic crisis can offer an opportunity to start transform to the global economy more sustainable. I'm a little bit hesitating, but still, it would be an opportunity. Then, one key area for action here is on incorporating social and environmental costs in regulating and pricing of goods and services. So to see the real price, we have also to change the way to measure progress by creating an index or set of indicators of sustainable development. I think that concerning these externalities, we already understand that we have not put the real price for such kind of thing like fresh water or the fresh air, or not even for all minerals or some other things what we have taken from the nature. But it's also another question which is discussing that whether we have put all the social costs in these prices, or whether they are also social externalities, that we don't count what does it mean when children are working, if the women have no rights, or if the men cannot get a new re-education when they need it during the years. So then some old stuff also was very popular. For investment and financial transactions, new incentives for the long-term sustainability are needed. You can just guess what all kind of discussions we have had that. Then increased finance for sustainable development will be needed for public and private sources, including their partnership. Most of you are the good friends of ODA, okay? But have you counted how much more we need money than ODA? Even it would be 1% and not this 0.7, what was so-called negotiated 1%. It's not enough. But if we could find a way how we could use it like a catalyst to get more money from the private sector or from the public sector, so that would work. So then the next one. To achieve sustainable development, an effective framework of institutions and decision-making processes at all levels is needed. But more important than institution is a good governance, coherence, and accountability at the national and global level. They connect the circle back to the people and their democratic rights. It depends on speaker whether they see the biggest challenges at the international level, like in the United Nations, or at the national level, or at the local level. But I can tell to you that we have found a lot of people who need to do the better work at all levels. So the high-level panel, we made some recommendations in this field. We felt that the Global Sustainable Development Outlook report would help all of us to see what is going on so that we could follow the old or new indexes and we could see that in which way the development goes. You know very well that if you want to say that the government should do more, you need it. But sometimes also the governments could kind of help when they say that we anyway have done. I mean, it works to the both sides. And then we have also recommended considering the creation of the Global Sustainable Development Council in UN. But when this was the panel to Ban Ki-moon, so of course he might already see that in which way it would be best to go further. So last and certainly not least, we recommended that the government should agree to develop a set of the key universal sustainable development goals covering economic, social, and environmental dimensions of sustainable development. And we have already the good name for that. It would be Sustainable Development Goals, in the same way what we have the MDGs. But please don't hurry up. We don't think that it should be ready in Rio +20 this year. But we hope that we all could agree in Rio that we need those in 2015. So we would have few years' time now to hurry up with the MDGs and to see how to continue on that. And that I hope that we will see in Rio. So, ladies and gentlemen, when I look at the call of the Helsinki Process for New Coalitions through the prism of the Global Sustainability Panel, I see the recommendations of the panel offering concrete challenges. The recommendations of the panel are free for all to implement. I don't know whether you have got them. They will be anyway available in English in internet, and I think that that would be easily also copied if so needed. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President, for the comprehensive introduction to the work of the panel and its recommendations. And yes, would you please join us in the podium while...
This or that?
Either way, it's your choice.
Are you coming here?
Yes.
Okay, so we
yes.
go in this way.
Yes, actually our next keynote speaker is the Honorable Minister Membe from Tanzania, who will give us the points from the Tanzanian delegation towards the work of the Sustainable Development Panel. The floor is yours.
Because we don't know any teas. No, we don't make any teas.
Co-chairs, Your Excellency, Madam President of Finland, my colleague, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Finland, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, again, let me express our warmth and appreciation and the thanks to the warm hospitality accorded to myself and the delegation since our arrival in this very beautiful city of Finland yesterday. It's cold out there, but the inside is just as excellent. We thank you so much for that type of hospitality. Secondly, my president, Jakaya Mrisho Kikwete, was very willing but unable to come to join you in this afternoon session due to the commitments back home. He failed to do so. Madam President, let me thank the members of the panel. And by the way, your speech was excellent. We understood it. Let me just add the voice of President Kikwete by saying that we thank the members of the panel for a very insightful report, which not only focused on the ways for global sustainability, but have immensely explored and exposed concrete proposals for the post-MDGs of 2015. I also recognize tremendous efforts by His Excellency Ban in launching the high-level panel on global sustainability on August the 9th, 2010, which brought together renewed world scholars to formulate a new blueprint for a sustainable future on a planet under increasing stress resulting from human activity. Since 1992, most of African countries have achieved some progress in the implementation of sustainable development. However, sustained economic and social development as well as environmental protection remains elusive today. As a result, Africa remains off track in achieving the internationally agreed development goals, including the Millennium Development Goals, by 2015. Africa believes that implementation of sustainable development can be accelerated only with adequate and reliable means of implementation. In view of the above, Africa calls for the creation of the centers of excellency, such as the Dar es Salaam Leadership Institute, otherwise known as Uongozi Institute. Madam President, the Uongozi Institute in Dar es Salaam is a school of excellency. And I must hasten to say, this is where one legacy of your government, Finland, will live, and Africa will be there to remember it forever. It is a structure geared towards transforming the young generation of potential leaders in order to make them own the continent and govern the way the world expects them to do. On the green economy, Africa stresses that green economy is a tool for achieving sustainable development, must enhance technology development and the transfer, including high technologies and soft technologies, addressing technology transfer barriers, including rules of trade, tariffs, and the intellectual property rights and the barriers. We in Tanzania, in considering the poverty, the way to end poverty in the continent, have just one addition to make, that we are now realizing that one way of breaking the poverty cycle in Tanzania and in the continent is power. There is an absence of power generation in the continent, so much so that the rural people cannot add value to their crops. No industrialization can take place without power, and as a result of which there is no employment to the young generation. This absence of power discourages investors to come and invest in our countries. This absence of power compels farmers to sell their commodities and produce raw to the world market at a very low price. So definitely one way that we are really considering to instill when we speak to people like yourselves is to impress upon you that we are now embarking on power or energy exploration. We need to break this poverty cycle by doing just that. Now, regarding another matter that we consider to be supreme, which is capacity building, we must say that capacity building must focus on investing in human resources development, public education and awareness, strengthening institutions and improving their coordination, supporting the development of information systems, mobilizing and strengthening the role of the scientific and the technical communities, and promoting international cooperation and the sharing of expertise and best practice. Finally, Madam President, any commitment to sustainable development should be premised on the progress and the need to address the remaining gaps in the implementation of the outcome of the major summits on sustainable development in the context of support to regions such as Africa. In short, Madam President, yours was a very good report because it really addresses matters pertaining to sustainable development in the world and particularly in the continent of Africa. But coming back to the Helsinki process. Helsinki process to Tanzania has triple significance. One, the Helsinki process has made Tanzania to be seen as a voice of the South. Second, our bilateral relations, that is the relations between Tanzania and Finland, are at an excellent mood and position. We have excellent positions, excellent relations. We see eye to eye in international fora, and we stand together in major international issues. Finally, the significance of the Dar es Salaam Institute cannot be underestimated and understated. It is an institute of higher learning, and as I've said, it is an institute that prepares our young generation and the current generation to confront the challenges of the world effectively. So these are the triple significances that the Helsinki process provides to Tanzania. Globally, I must say, on behalf of the president, my president, that the Helsinki process cannot be expected to resolve the challenges and the crisis and the political upheavals overnight or even in 10 years, because the challenges are dynamic and they come on like mushrooms day in and day after. So to expect the Helsinki process to resolve these challenges overnight or in 10 years is missing a boat. There is no one institution, no one G, no one process, no one NGO, no one civil society, no one government that can single-handedly resolve these dynamic changes that the Helsinki process is trying to address. It needs a collective endeavor of the multi-stakeholders, as we have correctly said. And this is why we are here. I wish you every bit of success, and once again, congratulations for a very good report and your comments this afternoon. Thank you.
It's on. It should be on. Did you press it? Yeah. Now it's on. Now it's on. No, just again. Yeah, now it's on. Ready, yeah.
Before I give the floor to the audience, I would like to ask a question for the both of you. Starting with Honorable Membe, Citizen has been involved in the Helsinki process from the beginning. This international cooperation has enhanced national dialogue between civil society and the government, as well as strengthened cooperation between different civil society. My question is, how can we make sure that this practice will continue feed into the Rio +20 preparatory work, both nationally and the conference itself? For Madam President, the vision of the panel is very strong and comprehensive, and our expectation is that it can be shared largely. The problem, however, is in the implementation. We have witnessed the commitment of the government several times to the MDGs, and still we lag far behind in the implementation. In the report, it says that lack of political will was the reason for inaction regarding the recommendation and proposal done in Brundtland report. My question or my problem is, how can we make sure that the required political will be found this time?
Oh, good. Yeah, thank you very much. With respect to the engagement of the civil society in order to address the Helsinki process, issues stipulated in the Helsinki process, I thank you for realizing that Tanzania has done a great deal in trying to engage. In fact, following the multi-stakeholder approach to engage the civil society, the academia, the media, the non-governmental organizations, as well as other professional individuals interested in the Helsinki process to really make the difference. This is what we have witnessed in Tanzania for the past 10 years, and I thank you very much for recognizing this. Now, with respect to what the government is going to do when it comes to Rio +20, I can inform you that President Kikwete met the Rio stakeholders of Rio +20 in Davos last month, and they invited him to prepare an agenda for agriculture in the Rio +20. Now, subsequent to that, President Kikwete has now invited ministers of agriculture from 8 countries that have been identified as pilot countries, but together with that, he has vowed to invite stakeholders like the civil society, other experts in agriculture, in extension services, professional individuals interested in agriculture to come together to Dar es Salaam towards the beginning of March to discuss issues that he thinks Africa should carry as a message to the Rio Plus 20, a meeting which I think will take place later this year in May or June. So it is the determination of the government of Tanzania to involve stakeholders in agriculture of all sectors so that we can come up with a recommendation letter to the Rio Plus 20 in order to make a difference. I thank you.
So if I should give a very, very blunt, short answer, of course we cannot guarantee, but we have to do everything in order to guarantee it, because that's the point. So the first thing was that when Ban Ki-moon made this high-level panel, so it was new in such a way that half of the members of the panel were women, and the other half were men. And I can tell you that after half a year, the women didn't notice that, and neither men, that there is something special on that. And that was a positive signal. So we have to, for instance, when we are empowering the people, we have to remember all the time that we do both women and men, young and old, and we also include poor or unemployed and so. And of course we cannot just to make an order or the action that now you do that. But we have to find the channels how to do this political will. And so Ban Ki-moon has asked me and the others also to work before the Rio so that we are a certain kind of the small group also working for that. I was, a week ago I was in India where the Indian member, Minister of India, has organized together with Mr. Pachauri, who is a chairman of this climate change panel, to do to make a summit in Delhi, where we have about 2,000 people gathering together, and then we discussed already there what to do now in order to create this political will, which will be quite a challenge, not only in Asia but also in India itself. But that's it. And so in Dar es Salaam it was an African Union where also they have these meetings. I'm sure that also in Copenhagen after 3 weeks, where it will be the European trade union organizations, the syndicalists gather together, so not only me but all the others will think that in which way the unions can work for the same item. And in such a way, I think everywhere we are doing now the networking in order to guarantee what you quite correctly asked, that the political will should be in Rio already. But then another question is, what about after the party, as we say? Everybody, like in Copenhagen, you remember, many of you have been in Copenhagen in climate change conference. We prepared so well, but it was a bit more difficult in January after that to take the same forces together, especially when we thought that we didn't reach quite that much what we hoped. And now I think that Rio Plus 20 idea is really that we don't think that we change like that the world, but we promise to work together. First, these 3 years in order to get the sustainable development goals. Sometimes agreeing, sometimes disagreeing, but being clear that we have to do. And at the same time, to remind or to say that MDGs should get as good results as possible, because that will also increase the possibilities with SDGs. And then, in a way, step by step, I hope so, that we are able to create such kind of the global compact idea for reforming the world. That we will say after, let's say 2030, we will say that, oh, that's a normal way, of course we do it that way. But then I take another, sorry that I'm so enthusiastic for the idea. You can take also not only the global level, but you have to take at the national level and also local level and regional level. For instance, here you see that there is a fine winter days outside of this conference place, and the Baltic Sea is nicely covered with beautiful white ice. But in the matter of fact, this Baltic Sea is a very fragile sea, the very low, very sensitive area. And we have gathered here a global compact idea, which is also introduced in this report, where not only the governments, the heads of states and prime ministers and governments of the all Baltic Sea states, but also enterprises and NGOs are working for the cleaner Baltic Sea. And we have succeeded already 2 years ago to get 150 different commitments, which was made in the same way what you know from New York, this Clinton's Global Initiative. And it's not enough that you make a commitment, because we follow it by the internet, what will happen. And I always encourage and say that it's good to reach the goal and the commitment. But the second point is that if you honestly try it and you don't make a success, so we should study together why it was so hard to achieve. And when you said concerning the Millennium goals, the same. If we see that this or that has not been succeeded, the basic issue has been mainly, and in the most cases, the lacking will. But not only one person or two persons, but with the different complications. And then to say that I don't think that you are bad or I'm bad, but let's try again and let's see how it goes. Of course, there are people who don't mind, don't care. They would see only their own money. But there are also people who don't know how to do. And this transfer of the modern techniques, as you said, this is one enormous opportunity. So, yeah, I think so that we will have good possibilities to make more political will in Rio and also after the Rio. And that's why I think we are here.
Thank you very much. And now we will move forward to the questions and comments from the audience. Please introduce yourselves when you comment. Kjeld, you will have the honor to start.
Well, thank you for giving me this honor. My name is Kjeld Jacobsen and I am from Brazil.
Oh.
My question is about one of the axes of the Rio Plus 20 discussion, green economy and poverty eradication, particularly the issue of the green economy, because there is a lot of mistrust around this term, green economy, what it means among the social movements, I have to say, because it's not clear. By one hand, if it's a discussion about a change of paradigm, productive paradigm, let us say a production with less fossil fuel utilization, with a change of the pattern of consumption, particularly in the developed part of the world, more equity between people and countries regarding, the share of resources, possibilities of consumption. Let us say everybody should have the right to have a car, for instance, but it's not possible. So why, like in my own country, where you have some wealthy families with more than one even, and a lot of people without any kind of transport. So that's a discussion about equity, change of paradigm, etc. Or are we talking about a new moment of accumulation of capital through the appropriation and privatization of natural resources, which is obviously the worry of the social movement. So if we read the UNEP report on green economy, we obviously become very concerned because, how can I say, the liberal statement in it, how to engage the private sector and carbon trade, etc., etc. So that's why this is an issue that we don't have clear so far. So we ask you that have been part of this discussion if you can help us to clarify it.
So thank you very much, obrigada. First, I forget to say one important issue. Of course, there's all the time going many different kind of the processes, not only this high-level panel. That high-level panel was to help the Secretary General Ban Ki-moon to be prepared with UN to this. And of course, Brasilia was in the panel. And so sometimes they say, sometimes they say, come on, more speed. And I think that some of the basic ideas of the panel are already implemented in the preparations of the Rio Plus 20. So thank you once again for the good cooperation. Yeah, the word green economy, or like it was earlier used, the green growth is something for most of us here. It tastes very good. But what then it is? And that has been the big issue. And that's why I think that the lot of importance should be put in the modern technology, of course, as you mentioned, and especially, of course, in the sector of energy. Renewable energy resources have been again and again in the focus. At the same time, of course, when we use the fossil fuels and nuclear energy and all such kind of things in most of the country, or also in this country. And so the workers will say that how is their fate in the green economy? And we already know that automatically not all the jobs in the green economy, all the jobs are not decent. They are not even green. And in that way, we need the cooperation, again, with the unions, with the work safety experts and so on. But there are a lot of possibilities because we think that the green economy could be much more labor intensive what it has been so far. Then I could almost hear some of the Finnish financially active people to say to me that I have forgotten that how expensive is the labor. I said, yes, but if you also put the right price for energy and natural resources and everything else, so you see the real price. And I think that for the future, if we think the sustainable development, labor is one of the issues which is not dangerous. It might be costly sometimes, but it is just necessary and it will create the part of the sustainable development. Of course, another thing what you mentioned was that how you have tried to work already. So, of course, for instance, if we think now the renewable energy resources or in new type of the energy more generally, so all you two who have tried with the biofuels and all that, we know that always when you try to do something new, there's at least 3 others who say that, that's not good, and can be true, it's not true. It could still, but we have to find, we have also to accept certain errors, certain mistakes to be taken, otherwise we are stuck in the old mistakes. We have to find a new way. It might contain new risks and new mistakes, but we have to take a risk because we know that these old risks are deadly for the development. The third point is, you said that what about the consumption and the production? So Gandhi was very often said that there is enough for everybody's need, but it's not enough for everybody's greed. And I have also the Gandhi at my window table, so to remember. But what is then enough is another issue. But we have put in the panel report also that the models of the production and the models of the consumptions should seen again. And we in the North, of course, are very often thought that we are those consumers who are really using much. And that's true. But we see that the old model seems to be very much living also in the developing countries. And what's my favorite comment is that even USA and Europe would stop existing in the future that's not the solution for the planet. So you have to do it in Brazil, you have to do it in China, in India, in all the countries which are now growing very fast. Of course, all that more than 10% of population what the USA and Europe makes, even if they could be more moderate, it's not enough. They have to start it because they have a lot of technology, they use quite too much today, but what I also want to say to you, that if we find a good new ways to produce services and welfare, it doesn't mean that we all will live in the poverty. It means that we all will get new, rich life. And in that way, I think that it's much more to say that you don't all need to have a new car, but you can get a feasible, nice transport system. And sometimes car if you need it. And the last point is concerning the UNEP is that we think that the role of the UNEP is important and should be strengthened, but we don't see that the UNEP could be the only one who can solve these issues. So we need also the other items, but yes, the role to strengthen the role of UNEP will be also important.
Thank you. Would you like to comment on the green economy, or we'll take more questions? Yes, Rebecca?
It's okay, still, fine. Now here for you.
Small questions. I'm Vijay Prasad from India. Vijay Pratap from India. One is this whole sustainability debate. I want to understand why it is not located in returning the ecological debt which the North has to the South, and with the South, North within the South has vis-a-vis their peasants and fisher folk. I have never heard returning of ecological debt. When shall we start at least talking about it first? Second is, can't we think of a global energy justice bar where people for dignified survival and for quality of life should consume a particular level of embedded energy in their lives, and those above that should be taxed, and that tax pool should be used to return the ecological debt of the humankind, especially starting with the communities who are not consuming in a destructive fashion, as all of us, the 1 billion culprits sitting around here and outside, are doing. And the last small question is, when shall we start talking about the ecological crisis in the context of knowledge hegemony which modern industrialism has done? We have ignored the Sami knowledge of your people who knew that gaming a whale will destroy the other fishes also, or dryland peasants, or indigenous people. Their knowledge about the nature and the weather and everything is totally destroyed and delegitimized. It's still living in many of the southern parts, but it is classified in a pejorative manner: folk knowledge, people's knowledge, traditional knowledge, whereas it is time-tested classical knowledge. And so knowledge democracy is also very important in case of resurrecting the sustainability for the planet and not for panels only.
If I say very, very briefly, so I think that it's again this multiply answer which is concerned. For instance, if we think now, we discussed today about becoming meeting of Somalia in London. So we Finns, for instance, we consider very important that also the local leaders will be heard and are represented. If we speak about different items all around the world, so we should always remember that the local know-how is very valuable, very important, as you said. But I don't think that we can, either if we think the global governance, we cannot just order from New York, Brussels, or wherever, or from Rio, but we have remind once again and be also very careful noticing that whether in different countries this kind of the know-how has been respected. That's one point. The second is that I think that especially in the field of the green economy, the small and medium-sized enterprises are hungry to have cooperation in different parts of the world. The big enterprises, why not? Yes, some of them, especially in IT, see that there is a lot of possibilities. But in renewable energy sector, there is also a lot of small and medium-sized enterprises. Of course, I say very openly that also if you have put a lot of energy and know-how in the innovations, you would like to get also a price for that. It's not a question that one is thinking and the other one is taking the profit. But that can happen in many ways, in north to south, south to north, and in many ways. And in that way, I think that we have to see this system. In Qatar, in Doha, will be, of course, very important when UNCTAD meeting will be now in April to see this also. And what's coming, for instance, in agriculture, the dryland project, which will be also there, is one of those where you try already regionally to go further. So not only one impulse, but a lot of impulses which will be in the same line. But I think you will be also eager to speak on that. Yeah.
Sure. No, these are very interesting ideas. I would look forward to seeing people being taxed for the use of extra energy compared to the one that some of us are underprivileged. Now,
also here in the north.
Yes. Now, with respect to this ecological debt and ecological crisis, I will mention two things here. One, one major problem that troubles developing countries like Tanzania is when we have the hydroelectric power potential, and then we want to power generation of say 500 megawatts, and then you get experts from outside recommending to us that not to generate that power because of the environmental damage assessment. We are deprived of the right to have our own power in the continent because of so-called environmental damage assessment. But when you go to the developed countries and you see their greater and a huge hydroelectric power potential, you ask them the same question: how did you mitigate the question of this environmental damage assessment before you went into this project? You don't get answers. But when it comes to Tanzania, stop this because of ecology and because of the environmental damage. Please don't. You can go to gas and solar and other things. You don't engage yourself into the hydroelectric power potential. So it tallies with your concerns sometimes that we are not left to determine our own issues, particularly when it comes to breaking this poverty cycle, as I have said, with respect to this type of commands, this type of prohibitions that hamper and they are fatal to development, because we cannot develop unless we meet their conditions. But the other area is of mining. A lot of depletion takes place in my continent, in my country, where you have foreign companies coming to exploit mineral resources. They leave huge craters, and these craters would have been an agricultural field. These craters, if made well, they would have been water dams sufficient to feed even animals. But you leave them open, unattended, and they live. At the end of the day, you find the majority of this land has been depleted, has been left unattended, and nobody can compensate, nobody can say anything after the depletion has taken place. And I'm saying this to underline your concern and the concerns that we do have, that yes, I think discussions must start now, more than ever, on the ecological crisis that is taking place in Africa. And much of this depletion or this crisis is man-made and sometimes externally influenced, and we need to address this issue. So I quite agree with you.
If I also say that it's not only in Africa, we have the same problem here in Finland, in the northern part of Finland, in Lapland, because everybody in Europe or in USA knows that it's a country of the Santa Claus or the Father Christmas, but there is also the indigenous people called Sami people. I think most of them are nowadays more living on tourism than in the traditional livelihood systems. But now the mining is already in the future, some of the possibilities, and we have a very heavy debate concerning exactly the same. And so one answer what we have to give, the positive answer, is that we have used to live with the forestry, in the forestry and on the forestry. And that's part of our, how could I say, what we can give in sustainable development, because always when you plant a tree in the north, you cannot expect that you will get profits. It will be your son or your grandson or your daughter or your granddaughter, because it takes so long time that the trees will grow. And that gives a good view also what's a sustainable development.
Now we have at least 3-4 questions still. Do we have time for those before the coffee break? Okay, then we'll take 2 of them in the first, and then next Rebecca and Jas, and then Helena. Yeah, please, Rebecca.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask a question to Madam President and Honorable Member.
Can you
My
speak
question
closer?
to the President. I know you have been in many key processes at global level. You have been a member of panel in the ILO World Commission on looking the aspect of social aspect of globalization, but also you were in the panel of eminent person assessment answer and this panel on sustainable development. These kind of they are different, but they touch most of the key areas that we need to address. For example, the answer was more multilateral trade system regime, and when you look at this ILO's kind of part of the social aspects,
Yeah.
Indian has mentioned that touch people's lives. But when you look at the sustainable development, was more looking at the sustainability in the future. So based on this diverse experience and the position you have been having, do you think that these key processes at the global level, do they fit each other? Do they fit each other, because in a way they touch most important part of the sector that most of the problems that people have been raising in. So do these key processes fit each other? Because at the end of the day, we need all these aspects to be addressed for us to attain the sustainable development. My second question, I don't know what would be the answer in the first question, but also I want to get a feel from your experience at the global level in the process of solving the global problems. Are we close to the solutions, or we are still at crossroads? That would be my second part. And to Honorable Member, Tanzania is one of the countries that was committed to achieving the Millennium Development Goals. But as of today, there's still a lot of work that needed to be done. But also, some areas it's clearly declared that there's no way that we could achieve those indicators. Now we are geared towards Rio +20. My question is, as African leader, what's your strategy now? What's your proactive approach toward Rio? Because you have rightly put that most of these challenges that you mentioned in your speech need many actors to be able to achieve those. So what's the proactive approach in Africans? Are we waiting for big actors of this global economy to do the best in whatever, or you're going to come up with a new strategy to make sure that we make a difference in achieving sustainable development?
Now, in order to keep up the time with the conference as well, I will take all the questions, but please be quite short, and then we'll go the last round of on the podium. Please.
My name is Yash Tandon. I'm from Uganda. Friday 17th, next week, is Valentine's Day. the youth in Europe will give flowers to each other, roses. A lot of these roses come from Africa. We are exporting water to Europe. We are exporting water to Europe. Lake Naivasha in Kenya is a home for flower culture. Lake Naivasha is drying up because we produce carnations and roses to the lovers in Europe. I'd like to ask a fundamental question to the high-level panel. You told us about your terms of reference. What is your methodology? Are you taking evidence from people like me from Uganda who can tell you that lifestyles in Europe are damaging our economy and our sustenance? We are exporting water to Europe.
Yes.
Could you ask that they also close the mic?
Okay. Excuse me, please will you close the mic on the other side?
Okay.
Thank you.
I have a question regarding young people. When talking about sustainability, I want to stress the importance of participation in democratic life, and more specifically the participation of young people. Young people should have the possibility to participate in processes on a sustainable development, like this one, and the process of Rio +20, but also in society as a whole. Participation is the key to building a sustainable society. Young people must be empowered and given the possibility to participate in order to build a sustainable future, our future. But this isn't really the case today. So I ask you, how do you see that the lack of participation of young people can be improved in Finland, in Europe, and in the entire world? Thank you.
Then Kaisa and Jenny, very shortly, please.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Kaisa Kosonen, I represent Greenpeace International. I thank you and sincerely congratulate Madam President and her panel for the hard work you've put into this report, and I hope that people will not only read the recommendations and the vision, but also the full report, because it contains some very useful analysis. This morning, several people here in this conference have raised the point that we are yet to acknowledge honestly the role of corporates have played in getting us to the multiple crises we are today, and that there is a need for more regulation on that field. And in that respect, I would have hoped for more of this recognition as well as more robust action from the panel. The recommendation 29 talks about widespread adoption of voluntary principles, and the recommendation 31 seeks to align business practices with principles such as the Global Compact, which so far has been quite disappointing. Yet, compared to the zero draft, the recommendations would add quite a lot of value, and there are several things that should be taken forward, like the recommendation for mandatory reporting for corporates, as well as several issues on how to move beyond the short term and embrace longer term investment horizons, like phasing out fossil fuel subsidies and other subsidies, and reviewing investors' fiduciary responsibilities and so forth. So my question would be, what kind of reactions have your recommendations for catalyzing sustainable investment received so far, and whether there are candidates that are willing to take these recommendations forward so that we could get some more ambition to the zero draft than what we currently have. And secondly, on the financial transaction tax, I was wondering whether the panel was having a discussion on that, because it seems like there is more momentum for that now than there has been for a long time, but still it isn't in the recommendations. Thank you.
And one more.
Thank you. I'm Jenny from Citizens Global Platform, and I'm really happy to hear that President Halonen mentioned the mining industry in the north of Finland as well, and the impacts to the indigenous people. And as it was also mentioned in the speech of Mr. Membe, I would like to ask that what do you think of the proposal of getting the life cycle assessment of mining into the Rio +20 process, and why it is not mentioned in the zero draft
workers. It was mentioned in some of the preparatory processes, and did the high-level panel deal with that issue in its work? Thank you.
Those were the last questions anyway.
Yep. If I try to stand, yeah. It's not only the questions which might be long, but my answers are too long. First, concerning, I think that this is quite good to start with this, that whether how I see this more comprehensive view. Yeah, that's true. I have been in Millennium goals. I was together with the president of Namibia. In Fair Globalization, I was together co-chairing with President of Tanzania, Benjamin Mkapa. Now I was co-chairing together with the President Jacob Zuma of South Africa. There are also other ladies from the north, but I happen to be in all of those. I think so that the good side of these issues, and also to UNCTAD's report, where I have been with Professor Bhagwati now, is that the North-South dilemma is not what it used to be. We see that we are sharing the same planet. The history is unfair, but we have to see that the future is united. And there I come also to the very, very clear conclusion that we cannot think that we can consume whatever, but we can consume quite decent way also in the future if we are clever enough and if we feel the solidarity. So in that way, we are not sharing the poverty. We are sharing in the future the decent life. But then, of course, I'm an old syndicalist myself, like I almost guessed that she knew. So the workers very often are in the situation where they say that you should say more often yes, that we can make a new future. And sorry that I use now this to describe the situation. Once when I was trade union movement and I tried to propose a new negotiated agreement to the shop stewards, so they were very, very critical. And then finally I was a little bit fed up and I said, is this the present situation so terribly good when you are so much against all these reforms? And then the old shop steward, one of them said, no, madam, no, but we know this old hell and how to live with that. And this is a little bit the tendency what we have, not only with the trade unionists, but also the business people and the politicians, that no, this is not good, but we know this hell much better and how to behave with that. and then how we can create such kind of fair will to get the new things when we cannot guarantee that the situation would be better. This is what I said, that we have to allow that we make mistakes, errors, but in which way we can then compensate, because none of the generations is that one we can sacrifice. We say that that's for the future, yes, but neither I think we have got enough from such kind of the revolutions where you say that you have to sacrifice this generation that in the future could be better, because we don't think that it will come ever if we don't see it. And so in that way I think that step by step and not at once, that could be happen. And so I feel that especially the role of the women could be one of those crucial issues. What could be now supported strongly. In Africa you have strong women, and now take these difficulties, those troubles away what they have, they will be even much more effective. The same in many other parts of the world. Then the young ones, this will be, yes, I always say that you are today young, but tomorrow it's over. But but if you're born as a girl, you will be a woman for all your life. But really, the sooner we get the youth to come with us, the better it is for them and for us and for the future. We see what has happened in Northern Africa and in the Middle East, and how frustrated you become when you invest your own capacity and all your resources and then you don't get the answer. But I think that the good example that could be now told much easier with the internet and tell that helps everybody. But then we need partners to both the south and north, and I think that's very, very important. I can say that it's not so easy here in the north either to try to say that let's make the better world. I have survived 2 times in the presidential elections, but not without critics, as everybody knows here in Finland, because everybody wants to get more for their own country, because there are a lot of poor people also in the country, and very often the rich ones have not got enough. So in that way we need the networking nationally, but we need it more and more also internationally. So let's face the fact. And then what was coming to this exporting the water? Yeah, this is I think a very, very important issue. I always wondering when I see, for instance, in the bottle that this is a bottle of Fiji. I have always thought that Fiji is an island which needs all its water. But that's in many other places. What is the role of the exports, and what is the role of the local and national food and other issues? And I think that's what I said about the right pricing. You should price it much more, but then it's a question also which are the trade barriers and not, which are not. And that was with certain strong countries also told, like for instance India, that what are the trade barriers. And then the transaction tax, yes, feeling the solidarity to the consensus which we found, that was the best result what we could achieve with consensus. Okay.
Well, let me also respond very quickly to 3 questions that were directed to me. One is with respect to the MDGs. Certainly no one country, as we go down to 2015, no one country will have achieved all 7 MDGs, because essentially there are 8, but the 8th one deals with the aging developed countries to contribute and to meet their pledges. So there are basically 7. I don't think there is one country that will be achieving higher records in implementing all the MDGs, which is why the Secretary General had impressed upon countries to choose priorities in those MDGs. Which one would you like to implement? So Tanzania chose MDG 5 to address the infant mortality and the maternal mortality rates. And of course the research was done and it discovered that the majority of these deaths of mothers and children were basically born out of HIV and malaria, and sometimes also water. What's the opposite of clean water? The dirty water. So the government, together with the other stakeholders in the past 6 years, addressed this question of trying to eradicate malaria, and we have a sustained war against malaria, and the achievements are huge. And also testing HIV in order to really distinguish between those people who have been infected by it and they get the treatment. And this was started. The initiative was taken by the President and the First Lady to go in public and tested HIV, and it drew in almost everybody because there was fear of testing HIV/AIDS together with malaria. So the achievements have been very nice, and people's response has been good, and to a greater extent we have addressed this issue of maternal death and infant mortality. Up as we started in 2007, for example, 587 mothers out of every 100,000 were dying because of this. 587. Now revelations are saying we have reduced that number now to 310. In every 100,000 births, the mothers now die 310, compared to 2007, where 587 were to die in every 100,000 cases of maternal births. And with respect to the infant mortality, there is also a slight improvement. We were losing in every 100,000 births of infants, we were losing about 1,800 children, infants going. Now the figures are at least promising. We are now losing about 900 out of every 100,000. So we can see a drastic improvement in the infant mortality. So then what is our strategy as we go to Rio Plus 20? The best strategy is engagement. We ask the Rio Plus 20 to enlarge the number of representatives, particularly from developing countries, because as you know, we are not there. And sometimes even the agendas, unless we get goodwill people like the panel to take our concerns to the Rio Plus 20, we are normally not heard. It's only this time that I can see progress where my president has been invited to attend the Rio Plus 20 on agriculture. The topic has already been chosen. Agriculture. How do we improve agriculture in the continent? And so we said the stakeholders, including the government, non-government organizations, will sit to discuss on what we are going to do in the Rio Plus 20. But certainly the MDG issue can be cropping up as we go to Rio Plus 20. But I can say we are just responding to the call. It being left to our own to discuss what we want the Rio Plus 20 to discuss, I'm sure the issue of MDGs would have come up like that. So our wish is in the near future, this G20 number must change. If it brings G30, that is plus 10 coming from the least developed countries, I'm sure we'll be addressing these matters. With respect to the roses being exported to Europe, water being exported to Europe to the extent that the Naivasha lake is now drying up. That is because now the Professor Yashtandon is saying Europe is this lifestyle of Europe is damaging Africa. Professor Yashtandon was a one-time professor at the University of Dar es Salaam, and I remember to have read his articles written in the University of Dar es Salaam debate on class, state, and imperialism. He was talking much about classes and class struggles in the neo-colonies, and so I'm not surprised to get this type of a question. But correctly, Madam President, as you have said, we need to look at the restrictiveness that Africa puts when it comes to exportation of the necessities that we ought not to have exported to the outside world, the tariff barriers and non-tariff barriers. And I think it's the argument here that if we come to the point of exporting water to the world while we need it much, particularly now that we have these climate changes that are affecting the water regimes, then certainly something must be done by the governments in power to restrict the exportation of the necessities. Because if we do not do so, then certainly we are digging our own graves, and we shouldn't do that. That would be my simple answer. There is another issue, the participation of young people in development. Certainly this is a very good call. Until today, and this is through experience, until today, Africa has been involving the young people in wars, in civil wars. And so you have young soldiers fighting. Young soldiers who are really small boys of 10, 12, 13, 14. They just hold guns in Somalia or even Mogadishu itself fighting. So this is the only employment I have seen in Africa where the young generation is forcefully employed to fight wars, civil wars. This must stop. And Tanzania is campaigning against this militarization of the young generation. where the young generation needs to participate, or they have to participate in economic development or social development, going by their age, and they must be seen as a future. We must invest in the future, and these are the futures to which we must invest, to provide them with jobs that are highly paid, to take advantage of the education that they have, rather than just collecting them in hundreds to send them to the battalions to fight wars or civil wars. So I think it's a good reminder to all of us that we need participation, and this participation must be underlined: participation in economic and social development, not participation in wars of our own creation. Thank you.
So if I say one thing what's very common, so if we think the priorities for the Rio Plus 20, so fresh water, access to fresh water was one of it's the first real green para in Millennium development goals. And of course it should be also in SDGs. And fantastic how you put also the bridges to the social dimension, not only what's to drink, but also how it was the part of the healthcare. So that's also, we have the common priorities in that sense.
Thank you very much, the main speaker. But before I close up, I would like to put this forward to you, that when we conceptualizing sustainable development, youth should be in the center focus, as the impact of today is doing, define their destiny. So, Madam President and Honorable Membe, I hope that the Rio Plus 20 commitments will take on board the role of youth in building the sustainable society. Thank you so much for your contribution, and thank you for your question and contribution as well. Right now we are going for a coffee, and we can still asking them questions in case we have one. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.